McCarthy, who is the writer and director of the film you just saw. Did you all like it? Yeah. He's also an actor. You're going to recognize him immediately. You know, many different movies. This year alone, Little Fockers, Fair Game, Jack Goes Boating. That's just you know, in 2010 actually. The Lovely Bones and Michael Clayton, Syriana, Good Night and Good Luck. Also on television, you saw him as Scott Templeton in The Wire, great show on HBO. Law and Order and many other shows. Please welcome Tom McCarthy.
Thank you very much. Thanks for sticking around.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming out here tonight. And this is your third film as writer and director. As I just mentioned, you know, everybody knows you as an actor, but this one is a little different from The Visitor and from The Station Agent. I think it's a little more of a comedy than what you've done before, which is great to get into that. Was that something you definitely wanted to move into, or?
Yeah, I think after The Visitor, which was obviously a little bit more of a dramatic and delicate film, we wanted to have a little bit of fun, and I think when you start off with high school wrestling as your jumping off point, you know, it's going to be a little bit different.
How did you start off? You actually, in high school, I guess, dabbled in wrestling yourself, right?
I didn't dabble, I was really good. I killed it. I was a 101-pound terror, which is true. This started as a conversation with my friend Joe Taboni, who developed a story with me, who we wrestled together on this team, the New Providence Pioneers, that you see represented in the movie. And we were both pretty bad. And one day we were just talking, and we were kind of reliving the pain that was our wrestling careers. And I said, you know, hasn't been a good movie for a long time that dealt with high school wrestling since Vision Quest, really.
Yeah. We've got some Vision Quest fans, Matthew Modine fans here.
Yeah. Okay. Early Modine. And so it started as a joke, and from there I started thinking about it more seriously, and then this film emerged.
So you say that so kind of offhanded, this film emerged, but it is so much more complex than, you know, just having wrestling as a background and things. I mean, and with its character, I mean, the main character, Paul Giamatti, it really says something about where we are right now and the choices we make. And I think, you know, it's nice to have wrestling as a background here, but you had much more in mind once you got into the writing of this.
Yeah, I think, like I said, it was a jumping off point. And after I started thinking about really setting it in the town, and there was a lot of talk at the time, 2 or 3 years ago when I was developing this, about Middle America and the squeeze and how they were dealing with it. And that really interested me, like, what does that really mean, and could I really represent it in a way that I felt was authentic without necessarily commenting on it or condescending to it or romanticizing it or sensationalizing it. Just drag a story out of the people who live there and the people who value that dearly.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting for these times, and risky on your part, to create a main character there who makes this sort of very questionable, actually, not even quasi, moral decision, you know, and to keep the audience behind him, because really, essentially, he's a good person. And the people in this, all of them, the Melanie Linsky, the mother character, all of them seem to be essentially good people with really big flaws that they go through.
Yeah, I would probably agree with you, and I think there was something about setting a movie in such a conventional arena that was challenging to me, that I thought, can we do this, and can we do it in a way that's compelling, can we tell a good enough story to, you know, suck an audience in and take them on a journey. And I think a big part of that is relying on very good actors to tell the story. I always leave a lot of space for my actors, and I knew if we could execute that element of the film, and, you know, the screenplay was strong enough that we'd have a shot.
Can you talk about the casting here? Because I had actually talked to the producer, Michael London, and at one point he said, you know, in his mind, he saw Mark Wahlberg in the lead at one point. And he went to you and you said, nah, I see Paul Giamatti. And did you know Paul Giamatti? You had not worked with him.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, similar body types, really. I don't know if you guys saw Giamatti's early Calvin Klein ads, but they were that's the thing that initially just there was an attraction I had towards him.
You knew him, though.
It's the weirdest thing. I'm going to wake up screaming with that image in my mind. Yeah, I've known Paul for a long time. We wanted to work together for a long time, and we went to school together. And I just felt like this was the right thing, and honestly, I think Mark's a great actor and a really honest actor and be really right for something like this. Paul brings a very different quality to it, and I also thought it was something I hadn't seen Paul do before, which, because I have known him for so long, it's something we immediately talked about. The first time I sent Paul the script and we sat down, I said, I think there's one major challenge for you here. If you see it as a challenge, he's like, yeah, I know, the guy's happy. And I was like, yeah, and it was true. It's like, how do you find the drama in that with a guy who's content in his life? And granted, he's dealing with the anxiety that a lot of us are dealing with now, which is how to contend with these shifty economic times. But there was a certain contentment to this character that I think Paul had to embrace, and a straightforwardness that he's such a dynamic actor and such a charismatic and compelling actor that how do you button that down a little bit and make him a small town lawyer, someone that you can sit there and talk about your will with. We were talking about an elder law attorney, so it wasn't the sexiest of all law forms. It wasn't opening itself up to big courtroom drama, and we really tried to stay true to that, and that became its own challenge.
And also among the fantastic cast, Bobby Cannavale, who you've obviously worked with before, who's so great in this. I loved his character and timbre. I love the way all of them work together. But Alex Schaefer, who plays the kid, has actually never acted before, certainly in movies. And can you tell us your decision in casting him?
Yeah, he wasn't totally raw, to be honest. There's been talk about that, but in 6th grade he did play Samuel in Pirates of Penzance, which he finally fessed up to. He's like, I have to tell you something, I did do that. I was like, what? He's like, I did do some acting. And I said, how do you know? He goes, my mom reminded me. Which is pretty much how the kid operates. And I was like, and then he told me, and for a while he was calling him Sailor Number 1, and then he realized he had a name, Samuel. So anyway, yeah, Schaefer, I decided early on, for better or for worse, I needed a wrestler for the role. That I'm a big sports nut, and I can't stand when I see movies, and I just don't believe that the very good actor has never dribbled a basketball or hit a baseball. It just drives me crazy. And I didn't want to cut around it. I didn't want to cut it in an action way. I wanted to sit back and watch the wrestling. And so we cast this kid and really put him through the ringer. He came in 7, 8 times, just kept coming back, and it wasn't like he ever nailed it. It was always like, I think he's going to get it, but he's such a weird kid. He was tough to read. And it's not, I mean, his parents will tell you the same thing. They're like, he's a weird kid.
Was that his real hair?
Yeah, he came to us like that, which I loved. And I said, so what's up with the hair? And he goes, we had a big match, and the team, we did it to psych out Phillipsburg. And I was like, it was a psych out maneuver, the blonde platinum hair? And he's like, yeah, why? Like it was like Maori war paint or something. But he was very, and to be fair, 2 weeks after we cast him, he won the state championship in New Jersey at 119 pounds. So the kid is, it's not an it's a yeah. But he's a legitimate, actually Tom went down.
I was the only guy that saw him from the crew, and he was awesome. He was great wrestler.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was here in LA and Tom was already in New York, and so I sent him, right?
Yeah, and actually I reported the results wrong in one match because I couldn't understand the scoring. But his style was different than all the other wrestlers too. He had some sort of weird, he was always in a medium position, and like guys would leap at him and he would take advantage of their faults and flip them, and it wasn't like everyone else's style. It was an interesting way that he wrestled.
Yeah, he's known as a really odd wrestler, and everything about the kid's a little odd. When he came in, he was wearing like pajama bottoms and slippers, and it's literally what I liked about the kid, because I always saw this role as a sort of, I didn't want him to come across as your everyday jock, and nothing about this kid reads everyday jock, except for the fact that he's, a superior athlete on every level. He's been wrestling since he was like 5. Wow. And it's literally all he's ever known. And even, there's lines in the film like where he's shopping with Amy, and Paul and I would talk to him a lot about school and reading and this and that. I'd be like, what do you think about college? He's like, only if I can wrestle. It's like all about that. And the way I'm doing him is really how he sounds. Like Tom and I would be editing him, and Tom would be like, where's this kid from? And I'm like, New Jersey. He's like, he sounds like he's somewhere between Liverpool and Oklahoma. Like this weird accent.
Does he still want to act, or is he back in
Now, the weird twist of fate to this story is that in the Nationals last year, end of his sophomore year, he broke his L5 in his back. He fractured it. Yeah. Yeah, that's the right response, by the way. But he didn't know for like months. He was wrestling with it, which just shows you how good he was, because I would have crumpled onto the floor. But that's the kind of competitor he is, and so he couldn't wrestle this year. So now, but his whole thing, he's totally turned his passion to acting, and he's like full on, taking classes and completely, immersed in it now.
That's cool. Now, Tom, can you talk about the relationship you have as, he's got a mic, director, editor here? You've worked on all 3 of his films that he's done as a director here, and how does that work? Do you complete each other's sentences cinematically? Can you talk about that?
Well, I mean, we basically just, like most other editor-director relationships, I do the rough cut, and we work together after the shoot. But with Tom, we do many edit room rough cut screenings every couple of weeks, and Tom will actually quiz people for like an hour and say, there's a board with scene cards, and he'll say, was there a problem here? Does anything make sense here? And we'll get lots of feedback from people, and they'll tell us that we did a horrible job here, or a horrible job there, something needs to be cut, and we'll keep working on the film afterwards. So we're really open to a lot of critical feedback during the edit, and we're both willing to just sort of talk it out over a beer afterwards, and sort of just be pretty honest with each other, because we can be friends and talk about it and tell each other the flaws of things. And I don't know if that's different than most people or similar, but
It sounds a little different. It sounds like a little kind of different method of editing. You do that for what reason?
We do it because it gives us fresh eyes, and we spend 7-8 months editing. It's just the 2 of us in a room, so I'll bring 8 or 9 people into a room who don't know anything about the movie and just let them sit there and watch it. And it's amazing when you see it, and we'll really mix it up. We'll have 80-year-old women and 16-year-old boys in the room, or young men. And we really want that feedback. And it's not just the film community. I just kind of want to start to hear how people are perceiving the story and the character and what they're taking away. And then, sometimes we'll take a break from it and we'll just get back into our own work and forget everything everyone says. But it just challenges us to sort of get to the next cut in a way. And we can take what we want and leave what we don't need, really.
As writer, director, and then as editor, are you shaping this whole movie, though, in the editing room, or does it come in pretty much the way you've envisioned it with your script here? What do you think from your perspective, Tom?
I think Tom likes to rewrite a lot before he even shoots, and he likes to rewrite during the shoot and after the shoot. I think it's an ongoing process where you try to make more sense and flow a little better. And there's always, every movie has problems, and you try to work them out before you put it in the theater if you can.
Cool. Let's see if they have some questions here. Does anybody have a question in the audience? Don't be shy. I don't see any hands up. There. Yes.
Talk about the tattoos.
The tattoos. Talk about them. Yes. When we started getting into the districts and regionals, and Joe and I spent a year following these wrestlers. It was almost an unhealthy habit, just going around and going to matches and practices and everything. And a lot of these kids at the higher levels were tatted. They're just like little warriors, and it was a big deal in New Jersey. New Jersey is one of the better wrestling states in the country, and so they take it very, very seriously, and we just felt it was right for this kid coming out of Ohio who is also a very good wrestling state. And then the tattoos all had sort of specific meanings to us and to Kyle, hopefully, and to Alex. But all those, they weren't real tattoos. Even Amy's JBJ tattoo wasn't real. Hard to believe, but it wasn't real.
Yes.
So you said Alex was at Nationals. Is he in college now?
No, he's only a junior. So he won
In
as
high
a
school.
sophomore. Yeah, he was like 37. And I think before he hurt his back, his high school record was like 65-1. He lost to one kid, and the 3 kids he beat last year on the way to the States all won the state championship at different weight classes. So he's a weirdly gifted athlete, which is odd, because if you met the kid, he's not like any of the jocks I knew, nothing. He's a really sweet kid, and he's very disarming, and he's very open. So he was a really fun kid to work with. He was just a really good find, and obviously he kind of connected with the character. He'd never been on a set before, so it was really interesting to watch him working with some of these actors. But I think he just had such a connection with Paul and Amy especially, that it really put him at ease and let him just start to play.
I think it's great that you've opened the film on the weekend of NCAA wrestling too.
Yeah, thank you. You can thank Fox Searchlight for that.
Perfect timing, yes. Yeah, right up there.
To switch to a different aspect of the movie, I happen to be one of these highly dramatic and sexy elder law attorneys.
Wow. What's up? Uh-oh.
You did an incredibly good job in capturing the realities of that particular world. Could you comment on how you explored into that unhappy aspect of life?
Okay, the elder law she wants to know about.
Yeah, I think everyone could hear her. She's, well, my partner, Joe Taboni, the guy who developed the story with me, I should say Joe is one of my oldest friends, like we've known each other since 4th grade. He now lives back in New Providence, and he has his own law practice, and he is an elder law attorney. So there was a little bit of cherry picking from his life, and I spent a good amount of time following him around and just sitting in his office. I literally wrote in the office up in the boardroom, what he called the boardroom, and would go down and just watch and sit with him with clients, go to court with him, follow him around, and of course he had a lot of stories to tell, so everything was through his expertise. And my job was to try to distill that and make it palatable for an audience, again, without trying to condescend to the audience, but at the same time make it dramatic and be true to it, so that, like, courtroom scene. I sat through a lot of those court cases, and as you can imagine, sometimes I just had a hard time staying awake. And I mean that because it was such legal jargon, it was so low key, and it was fascinating to me because the stakes are so high. I mean, it really is. And Joe actually has his practices with his wife, is his partner in his practice, and they're so passionate about it and so committed to it, and they represent different sides of the practice. His wife takes on a lot of guardianships and is somewhere between a lawyer and a social worker, where I think Joe would consider himself purely a counselor to these people, and legal counsel, that is. And it's interesting that we kind of had to get somewhere in between there for the dilemma we were dealing with. But I think as in terms of a writer, and even Tom and I dealt with this in the editing room, that was the trickiest part of the story, to sort of make this clear to an audience.
And yeah,
Thank you very much.
yes, good. And Burt Young's terrific in the movie.
Yeah, Burt
too.
Young, I mean, come on, he's the greatest.
Yeah.
He was a real find. He was someone that we kind of thought of, and I just offered the role to, and he jumped in, and he was just at the right point to do this movie. Yeah.
But yeah, right there.
I just had a question. It's so funny, the movie's so funny, but I feel like it was just written on paper. It was so dry. How did you edit it to lead us to see all the humor in such a serious movie?
How did you edit it to see all the humor and everything? You're saying on paper it might have been dry. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Do you want to? She's saying, how did you edit it to make it so wonderful?
That sounds like an editing question.
I think you just make everything seem real and have it all flow as well as you can, and if the jokes happen. I mean, the actors together, Bobby and Mike and Paul, I mean, they were just great, so you had lots of great stuff to work with, and it was a joy. So.
Yeah, and I think it is just trust and trying to find a natural rhythm in comedy of that, and hopefully a lot of the comedy comes out of character and out of where they're coming from as opposed to just jokes, because that world, there are jokes, of course, they're funny people, they're witty, smart people, but it was trying to always go back to what the characters need and that type of thing.
Yeah, right there.
One of the tests that my husband and I use for a movie is if we can identify with the characters, and if we're rooting for them, we really care what happens. And I think you really touched on that so beautifully, that we really care what happened for his moral dilemma, so to speak. But I wonder if you've read the book, The Art of Racing in the Rain.
Yeah.
No.
By Gartenstein.
No, but it sounds cool.
It is a wonderful book, and if you read it, I would love to see it made into a movie.
Okay. Wow, did you just pitch me? I have officially arrived in Los Angeles. I just got in. This doesn't happen in Chicago.
Do you happen to own the rights to the book?
No, her husband wrote it. He's like, give the pitch, give the pitch. I'm kidding, I will totally check it out. It's cool. I love hearing stuff like that. In fact, there was a book that I stumbled across which was actually weirdly helpful in writing this. I was on the West Coast up in wine country here, and I stumbled into a cowboy store, which I know nothing about being a cowboy, believe it or not. And there was a book called Cowboy Ethics: What Wall Street Can Learn from the Code of the West. And it was kind of a coffee table picture book, and I picked it up because a lot of my family works on Wall Street, and I thought it would be a funny jab at them. And I started reading it on the plane home. It was by a former hedge fund guy out of Houston who wrote this book about 10 years ago. And it was these really simple rules about, look, we can no longer rely on city, state, or federal regulation. That it has to start to come from our own sense of personal responsibility. And he was very prophetic in the sense, he said, unless we do this, especially in in the financial world, things are going to get out of control because no one understands what's happening. It's such an arcane science that very few have control and power over. And look what happened. It was really kind of genius the way he broke it down. It seemed so basic when I was reading. I was like, wow, these basic, truisms really apply here, and that's sort of a jumping off point for the story. So that man who wrote that book, I think his name was like Thomas Owens or something, and it's something I kept referring to. It's very odd, and the pictures are great. It's like all these horses and snow and cowboys hanging out on cliffs. It's really cool stuff.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left before we have to get the next crowd in for the next show. Yes, right there.
Could you talk about your career in terms of what motivates you to do this, even though you have an established acting career? And also, do you ever want to get away from the independent, the challenges of funding, to get into more studio work? Right. Or do you want to stay independent, and why?
Okay, first he's asking about working as an actor and then getting into, the writing and directing. So, and then we'll get the second question.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a little bit one and the same for me because I started doing almost at the same time. I started as an actor, so I did that for a long time first, and started writing. And after The Station Agent came out, that sort of changed my career quite a bit. So whenever I have a movie ready to go, I just put acting on hold and I focus on the writing and directing. So that's really that simple. There's not much beyond it for me. And after this, hopefully I'll go back to acting if someone hires me. But to the second point of that question, which was
Independent, making independent
will I
movies.
sometime make big fat studio movies? This is a big fat studio movie. Yeah, I don't know. This is the first film I made with a studio. I made it with Fox Searchlight, who were tremendous partners in terms of being a first studio experience. It was just great. They were smart, they were very committed, they've been very committed through the whole process, but they were never intrusive in a way, artistically. And the film that you see up here is exactly the film I think we all wanted to make. We always felt that way. So if every studio experience was like this, I'll continue to make bigger movies. Sometimes what I worry about is you get too big and it becomes a collective, and I don't think I could ever work that way. I think that a film has to have a vision. That said, it's incredibly collaborative. I rely so heavily on my editor here, Tom, on my cinematographer, Oliver, on my production designer, my costume designer. I mean, to say it's your film is insane. It's such a collaborative process. But I'm very protective of our process. And I think sometimes when you get into the big movies like that, it gets harder and harder to assure that sense of vision.
Okay, right here. Yeah.
I was just wondering how the two of you came to work together, since you collaborated so many times.
How did the two of you come to work together?
How did you come to work together?
Yeah, how did you
It
do
was
that?
pretty random. I read the script through my agent for The Station Agent. I thought it was a really great script, and I had a phone meeting with Tom, and then I had to fly out on my own dime to meet with him in New York for a second meeting. And,
Wow, you still remember that, huh? Wow, 3 movies later, dude. I said I would pay you back for that. You need to let go of that.
But it was worth it.
Okay.
Holding on to that.
All
Thank you
right.
for that question, ma'am. This is our last film together, apparently.
Yes, right up there.
You kept the suspense up with that heater or furnace in the basement. Did you ever film it actually exploding and getting all those files wet? Because I was kind of worried about those. And I want you to know we've got a great soccer player who's a girl. If you want a sports thing for the girls.
That's cool, or maybe just a date for Alex.
I don't know.
Yeah, we did think about that. It's a good question, but we felt like that was becoming its own character, and that looming disaster was sort of secondary to what was actually the disaster that was playing out. So that became our main focus, I think. But the boiler just became a big fun character, and again, was something that when I was writing at Joe's office, that thing would clank it'd scare the hell out of me. I'd be like deep in thought. I'd go down, like, dude, can you not do anything about that boiler? And he'd be like, oh, don't get me started. It costs so much. The last guy who fixes a scumbag, And I'd be like, all right, that's pretty good. I'll be right back. It's kind of our relationship, more or less.
The first sound effect I put in for the boiler was really loud, but he's like, that's not loud enough. You have to put a louder one in, more annoying.
Yeah, it was really jarring, so we kept playing. We were like, how loud can we go with this? It's kind of like Jaws, if you think about it. It's like the dun dun dun.
Okay, we got time for 2 more. So yes, sir, right there in the middle there. Yeah. Okay, yeah. You get next, and then him. Yeah. Okay. First, the guy right there. Hi.
Hi.
Yes.
Can you talk about the very interesting casting process? Since all of these, or at least your main character was actually a wrestler, you can't just go and find them at a talent agency. So can you talk about the interesting experience it must have been to find all of these kids?
Okay, yeah, it's interesting casting process in actually going out and finding these kids.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Alex, the only other guy we had to cast that was really acting, that was sort of active like that, was David Thompson, who plays Stemler. And this young guy just came in and just immediately sort of won the role. He's so endearing and smart and unique, and his approach was great. And it's just his body type was right, and he just was totally game. So outside of that, we did a huge cattle call for all these wrestlers in the tri-state area, and just saw these different types, and then we had to put the team together, and every one of those kids are on a team. So it was great because their play, in the movie when we brought them in, they immediately became a team. Because in high school, all the athletes, they're just used to moving from team sport to team sport. So after a week on set, they were like a team. Like you had their little cliques. They had the goofball, the tough guy, the quiet guy. It was great. It was great to watch them, and it's a world unto itself. It's like this weird subculture. And we kind of just let them go most of the time. Well, honestly, because we couldn't control them. And so we had no choice. And then we're always like, keep rolling, just keep rolling, whatever we get. So that was a really enjoyable part of the process, I gotta say. I love working with those kids and with that team. They're really fun. And it's funny, we just had a cast and crew screening, and it's in a year. So they're all like 14, 15, 16, so they've all aged a year. So of course, they all look totally different. Like a few of them look like they're 43. Okay. I was like, well, who are you? He's like, I played,
I'll just say thank you for the movie. I really enjoyed it. But so the main character, when he was cast just based upon, like what you said, with open auditions.
Yeah.
Even though he had never really acted before.
No, I decided I needed a wrestler, so we had to keep vetting him and bringing him back in and back in and back in and back in. And, it was great, and especially like Amy Ryan, who obviously is so wonderful in the movie. Like her connection with him was really interesting, and how they opened up to each other. Very different than Paul and Bobby and Tambor, who just made fun of the kid the whole time. And at the same time, we're totally intimidated and in awe of him. Bobby's like, he kind of gets me nervous. I feel like I'm overacting. Am I overacting? That kid gets me nervous. And then of course, like halfway through the shoot, Bobby would be like, dude, I think I could take him. I'm like, do not try to take him. He's like, I could squish him. He's so small. He's 119 pounds. I'll squish him. I'm like, dude, just wait till the shoot's over to try to take him. And sure enough, one day I'm on the other side, and you're like, ooh, ow, ow, ow. And he like limps by me. He's like, kid's fast, dude. Kid's very fast. Which he is. Yeah.
Okay, yes, last question right here.
I was just wondering if you had an extensive rehearsal process.
Was there an extensive rehearsal process you want to know?
Yeah, I mean, for film, probably mine is a little bit more. I usually try to carve out 2 weeks based on actors' schedules, and my schedule during pre-production, which could be a little hectic, but I try to get them in every day. I try to start to create that ensemble feeling. I schedule a lot of weird field trips. We'd go to a lot of wrestling matches, tournaments, things like that. I started to bring Alex and let him hang around them so he could get over the people he was hanging out with and just start to enjoy them as people and not think about it. So. And also, I rewrite a lot during rehearsal, so I'm listening to the actors and what they're bumping up against. And they're all so good that if they're running into a line of dialogue that just keeps like an iceberg, then something's wrong with the writing, and I don't have much of an ego when it comes to that. So I'm very open to changes within limits. I think that's important, especially when you're working with smart actors. And all these guys come from the theater and they've done a lot of work. And it's weird, they're so committed, most of them, to what's on the page that you really have to push them to offer up suggestions, which I find incredibly noble. Where it's not helpful to any writer if an actor comes in, looks at something and says, I can't say it this way, this is how I would do it. And you're like, well, you're not helping us because we don't know how this sounds. And what they do is commit so fully that through their work, they show you the shortcomings in your own writing, and then making the changes is rather painless. Yeah.
Does that philosophy come out of being an actor yourself and working with so many directors who are directing you? Or?
Yeah, probably part of that. You know, I feel like good directors are very good at gently guiding you as opposed to, you know, displaying or showing you or you know, demanding a certain take or a certain type. But every director has their own approach, and there's a lot of great directors out there that I still learn from, so it's part of the process.
Well, I want to thank you for coming out and being so great and telling us all about this. Tom McCarthy, win-win. Just open today, tell your friends.